This is the FCB Radio Network, home of the best personalities and where real talk lives. Online at fcbradio.com. FCB.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Just Listen to Yourself with Kira Davis. I, of course, am your host, Kira Davis, and this is where we take hot topics, hot button ideas, and we draw those ideas all the way out to their logical conclusion. And today I'm just going to get right into it because I'm kind of up against it. Guys, I looked up and it was the end of March. How on earth is this possible? I've had so much going on this month, and not the least of which has been a lot of travel. And tomorrow I get to go to the Babylon Bee to hang out with those guys and podcast with those guys. And then this weekend I have the extreme privilege of traveling to Washington, D.C. to watch my friend Dave be promoted to colonel in the Air Force. The ceremony will be at the Lincoln Memorial, and I'll be delivering the invocation prayer, which I'm so honored and proud to do. So I'll be traveling to DC this weekend too, and I realized I only have 3 episodes out for this month, and one was a mini-sode. I was actually supposed to get you a full episode last week, but the other thing that happened to me last week was my 6-year-old nephew came from Arizona to visit, and we really enjoyed having him here. He was such a blessing. It was so fun to have little kids in the house, and for him it was great because, he hasn't been in school. He hasn't had play dates and friends, and he really hasn't socialized that much with other children over the last year. And I live in a neighborhood full of children, so it was really great for him to be out here. And it was so nice for his mom and the rest of the family to be able to see him having fun and enjoying other kids. And we enjoyed it too. So all that to say that my world has just been so busy. But I'm not ignoring you guys. So the least I can do is get you 4 episodes in March. It wasn't my plan. I planned to get you 5, which would have included that mini-sode, but it is what it is. What can I do? We're living life. So today I want to get right into it because today's subject, I'm not sure how much time I'm going to get out of it. That's the famous last words. I'll just listen to yourself. I don't think I have enough material here for a full episode. And 2 hours later, I'm editing like a mad person. Today, I want to talk about vaccine passports. It's in the news. It's been being talked about by other states, by New York and California here is talking about one. But I think what brought this to my attention is that the Biden administration has signaled that they're going to push for vaccine passports that would preclude you from engaging in commerce and public life until you got this vaccine. And I thought, this is not really going to be an argument from both sides today. Today, I'm going to argue why I think vaccine passports are a terrible idea, a frightening idea, and a precedent we don't want to set. I think I'm just going to draw this line right here. Now, I think if I'm being fair, I would say the other side of this argument that I'm seeing in social media, most of the people that I know are not for this. They're not okay with it. Of course, you go to Twitter and you can find anybody saying anything. So most of the people that I'm seeing saying that this vaccine passport idea is a good idea, their arguments seem to be that it's good to know who's vaccinated. So that, we don't want to have to go through these lockdowns again. We don't want to have, by the way, we're never going through lockdowns again. You can decide that. That's not actually up to the government, not in a country like the United States. We tried it. It didn't work. Didn't make a hill of difference to the numbers. And now we know why in the history of pandemics, no one has ever quarantined the healthy before. Now we know why, because it doesn't work. So we're not going back to that. And you can be the decider on that. As an American citizen, if you live outside this country, your country is, well, I can see your countries are doing it a lot different. And no one seems to have aced it. Harder the lockdowns, the higher the numbers. But even those people who stayed open, they've also got higher numbers. So I'm just saying we're not going into lockdowns. But now this next fight is this vaccine passport. So people say we don't want to go back into lockdowns. We don't want to have to deal with this again. So if you have a passport, it means that you're safe. So you can walk around without a mask. You can engage in commerce. You can engage with people, send your kids to school. Nobody has to be worrying about you, right? No one has to be worrying, oh, is this person vaccinated? Are they carrying COVID? Am I going to touch them? And then I'm going to get it, and then I'm going to bring it home. That is the only argument I can see for a, quote, vaccine passport. The arguments against the vaccine passport are vast, a mile high. A vaccine passport telling people that you're healthy. Where do I start? I wrote some points down. Where do I start? First of all, number one, this is personal health information. Your health information is private. In the United States, your health information is secure. No one has the right to see your health information or your health status without your permission. Now, the argument might be, well, if you have a vaccine, you're doing a vaccine passport, you're doing it voluntarily. If you want to shop at the store, then you're giving them permission to look at your health records. No, that's extortion. If you can't engage in, which these are the words that the Biden administration itself used. If you cannot engage in regular commerce and public life without this vaccine passport, then it's not voluntary. I guess you do have the choice to starve to death and never work again and raise your kids in poverty, or get a vaccine passport, get a vaxport, and go grocery shopping. But that's not the definition of voluntary, people. So this is not a voluntary act that they're asking. If your normal life is being held hostage to a piece of paper, that's extortion. Your health information is private. And I always say government never stops where it stops. I saw somebody on Twitter today saying, I know a lot of people are concerned that the vaccine passports, what else could it extend to? But I'll cross that bridge when I get there. Well, no, I don't think it's good enough to say I'll cross that bridge when I get there when you're paving the way to the bridge. It's like I'm laying all the foundations for the bridge, but, don't worry, I'm not going to cross it. That's a ridiculous argument. Let's not get anywhere near this bridge. Where does it stop? That's why we never should have done these lockdowns. We've already seen people online talking about lockdowns for climate change. Every day we hear about what a crisis climate change is. I've been hearing it since I was 6 years old. You can go back and listen to my episode on climate change if you want to know more about how I feel about that and the arguments I make against and for it. It's been an emergency for 40, 50, 60 years. So if climate change is as threatening as our politicians and activists tell us, then there have been a few people out there who have said, yeah, we should lock down for climate change until we can get the climate, quote, under control, whatever that means, until we can lower the rates to what we say the rates are. Then we should lock people in their homes and we should prevent them from driving and going to school. Do you see? It never stops. There's always somebody willing to take it further. That's why you always have to err on the side of freedom. You're never going to go wrong with letting people choose. Now, some people will choose wrongly. That is the downside of a free society. But the upside of a free society is that you are free to choose. And the government can't lock you in your house because they declare an emergency that you've had no say in. It doesn't stop here. What if the government tells you that you need an AIDS passport? We need to see that you don't have AIDS before you can engage in XYZ facet of life. Maybe athletics where you may get cut and bleed, or whatever, or the porn industry, or whatever. What if you need an AIDS passport? What if somebody says, well, we want to make sure that you have the proper amount of cholesterol, because if you fall over and have a heart attack in this, I know that this sounds crazy, but it is not. It is not. I come from a country with universal health care. And I can tell you that once the government owns your health care, they own you because they can do whatever they want to you under the guise of keeping you healthy. They can tell you they can tell you what to do. They can tell you how high to keep your thermostat, not because they're afraid of the environment, but because they say, well, we pay for your health care. We're paying for this. And if you have your thermostat too high, you increase your chances of a heat stroke by 2.5%. Therefore, we're making a law that says you cannot put your heat above 65 in the winter. I don't know if that's the law. That's just an example. But there are all kinds of examples of the Canadian government telling people what to do with their bodies because the The ultimate excuse, the ultimate justification is we pay for your health care. And it's the same with the virus. The ultimate excuse is, well, the government, which the government does, we pay for our health care in this country. We do. Even though government provides free services for COVID-related illnesses, you're still paying for it. It's still, you pay for it through your taxes, or you pay for whatever portion can be paid for through your insurance. So if people can say, well, look, this is really important to stopping the spread of the virus, that we need to know exactly what your health status is so that it doesn't spread. And because we end up burdened by your illness, that we deserve to know everything about your health condition and what you're doing to keep yourself healthy. I had somebody say the other day, I said on Twitter, I said, I went to a restaurant the other night and it was packed. It's supposed to be 25%, but no restaurants can afford this BS anymore. They can't afford it. So as long as they can be open, most of them are not complying with the reductions. They're being careful. They're doing other things, but they're trying to make money to stay alive. So I tweeted that, and Leslie Marshall from Fox News tweeted back, and she's one of their liberal foils over at Fox News. So it wasn't kind of somebody aligned with my ideology that was tweeting at me. But she was like, if you wake up with a sore throat tomorrow, don't go to the ER. Why wouldn't I go to the ER? Well, first of all, I would never go to the ER for a freaking sore throat because I'm not a toddler. And I'm not even that scared of COVID because I know what the numbers say. I read the numbers every day. We report on them every single day at Red State. And I know that almost every single person who gets COVID will survive. Almost all of the elderly who get COVID will survive. Almost every middle-aged person who gets COVID will survive. Almost every person with diabetes who gets COVID will survive. Now, the elderly, the obese, and those with diabetes, and they're often the same, you are a little more likely to get COVID and die than someone my age who's relatively healthy, obviously. But even that number is it's still 98% compared to 99.4% or 0.7% for the rest of the population. So that being said, the idea that she would tell me I'm not allowed to go to the emergency room if I wake up with a sore throat because I've been out at a restaurant enjoying my rights as a human being, I will get the health care that I damn well pay for. And if I want to go to the hospital because I don't feel well and I'm paying for it, then that is what I'll do. My mobility does not preclude me from the rights I have to be treated. But you see, in her mind, healthcare is a human right, right? Healthcare itself is a human right. And if the government gives you your human rights, the government can take your human rights away. So she's advocating for the government taking my rights away if I'm not acting, quote, responsibly enough. The problem with that is you may say, well, Kira, what is the problem with you staying home while we're in the middle of a pandemic? Are you carrying a Vaxport just to make us all feel safer? What is so wrong with that? It's childish that you would be angry about that. It's not childish. I think it's actually mature. I think it's childish to think that something like that couldn't go very far. And we all know the history of marking people with something, whether it's to wear a badge or to wear a certain color of clothing so that the government can properly identify you, whether it's to wear stripes so that the government can properly identify where you're supposed to be, or whether it's that you have to carry a certain piece of paper in order to even be out and about. We're not talking about driving your car or driving a forklift. We're not talking about stuff like flying a plane. We're not talking about that. For you to walk outside your house and to go buy sustenance for your family, to have a card that has sensitive and private health information on it. To you, it's just one vaccine. Today it is. Today it is.
Politics are becoming more and more divisive every day. My name is Colin Jackson. I'm the co-host of Not Another Political Podcast, where we reject popular opinions and prioritize solutions over partisan dogma. Download Not Another Political Podcast on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast entertainment today.
I think it's childish to believe that it will never go further. People are already calling for all of this pandemic response to go even further. There are people, as I just said, who think that we should lock down for climate change. So I don't think that is a decent argument. I don't think you should have to show the status of your health in order to avail yourselves of the everyday human rights, God-given rights that you have to move around, buy food, go to work, put food on your table, send your kids to school. Number 2, when did we decide that the goal is zero COVID? I was looking at the UK COVID tiers. I think they have colors. And green is no COVID detected anywhere. When did we decide that that was the standard? Do you guys realize how scary that is? You can't get rid of a virus. There's always going to be COVID somewhere. Someone somewhere is always going to have COVID the way that someone somewhere always has the flu. We're a year into 15 days to slow the spread. At some point, we have to stand up and say, this is enough. We're going to have to learn to live with this, to live with it. And we're living with it quite well, if you ask me. I would say 0.3% chance of dying from a virus is a pretty damn good record for a deadly virus. We are doing well with this. We're doing more than well. We're doing so well that we actually, the ships, the Mercy ships that Trump sent out to California and New York never got used. 4,000 beds on the Mercy ships. Never got used. We never needed them. No one ever anywhere surged that high. I do hear that during the wintertime, some of the ICUs got in some places got pretty crowded with COVID patients. And that was the downside of this virus, right? That it was, it's respiratory. So it requires a level of care that is a lot more than the flu, which can easily overwhelm an ICU and healthcare workers. So that's fair, right? That's a fair assumption. But the idea that we're going to completely get rid of this and never talk about COVID again, no, it's always coming back. And in fact, now that our politicians know that they can impose lockdowns on us, take emergency powers and keep emergency powers, basically making them dictators in their own state, do you think they're going to give that power up willingly? Have you ever been in a position of power? We talk about it all the time on this show. What power does to people. I think there are very few men and women who can resist the temptation of great power. I do. I think a lot of you out there listening to me think that you would go to Sacramento or to Washington, D.C., and you'd be Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and you'd tell the truth, and you'd change the system, and it doesn't work like that. The system changes you if you're in there long enough. The system changes you. I just think that power is irresistible, and in the hands of people whose lifelong ambitions are being politicians, that's not a healthy lifelong ambition, if you ask me, to be a politician. It's not. So maybe serving your fellow man is, or being in public services, but to be a politician, that's not a healthy. That's like saying I want to be a YouTube celebrity or a TikTok celebrity. I do believe there's nothing healthy that's going to come from it for you or for anyone around you. So I think we should be leery of giving those people the kind of power that we've already handed over to them. And now that they know that they can scare us into doing that, what will they stop at? Am I wrong about this? I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Do I sound crazy? I said something similar on Twitter earlier, and someone was like, I don't need your Q nonsense. I'm like, what? Do I sound crazy? Is thought starting to sound crazy? Is like reasonable, logical, critical thought starting to sound crazy to you? Write me at JLTY at protonmail.com. JLTY at protonmail.com. And let me know. Maybe I am being crazy. I mean, tell me why I sound crazy telling you that the government could overreach here and that the potential is there. I'm listening. Would you accept the requirement to carry an international passport to travel between the states, or a passport period to travel between the states? Would you accept being stopped at every state border to show your driver's license? We do not require passports to travel state to state. Now, we require ID to fly, but that has nothing to do with crossing state lines and everything to do with security. Funny enough, we don't require voter ID. But whatever. That is another JLTY that's coming for sure. But why would we be okay with requiring drivers? We're not okay. I know that most Americans are not okay with this, to go to another state, to even drive to another state or bike to another state or walk to another state, to have to get stopped at the border of that state and required to give them an ID. Well, that does sound like a communist country, doesn't it? Where you don't have the ability to travel freely. That does. I mean, that really does, doesn't it? No, that's freaking creepy. Why would we say that that's okay for a vaccine passport? Here's the other thing. This is an argument that anti-vaxxers use a lot. If you're vaccinated, why do you care? If you have the vaccine and you are now immune to COVID, then why do you care if you're around other people who aren't vaccinated? Now, my response to anti-vaxxers when they talk about that in regards to vaccine is herd immunity is very important. And it's real, and it is a thing that matters. So I think that it is fair to say, even though I may not want the vaccine right away, and I don't want it right away, I'm going to wait. I'm going to take my time. But it's fair to say, well, before we get back to totally normal, we should at least make sure that we're at herd immunity. The consensus, the scientific consensus, the medical consensus, even before COVID, this is generally what they say about vaccines in general. 70% of the population vaccinated is herd immunity. You reach herd immunity. That's why it's kind of been concerning as we've moved away from the idea of vaccinating for some of the more egregious diseases in our world history, like smallpox and mumps and polio, those things that what's happening is herd immunity is dropping with those viruses like whooping cough here in California. We've officially dipped under herd immunity. And a lot of people around here like to blame the illegal immigrants because it's very easy to blame everything on them because we have a lot. And right now our borders are overwhelmed here in California. I'm very close to the border, and life is changing here very rapidly because of the crisis on the border, for 100% for sure, seeing it with my own eyes. That being said, we like to blame everything on the illegal immigrants. Well, no, we're not having a problem with herd immunity because of the illegal immigrants. It's because of the yoga pants moms. That's the group that's taken our herd immunity down with things like whooping cough. So I get it. Herd immunity is important, and I'm willing to suggest that that's a decent compromise for being completely normal. Hey, herd immunity is when everyone can feel a little bit safer, but we're going to be at this pace with the amount of people who are excited to get the vaccine and going to get it. We're going to hit herd immunity in June or July. Why would we need a vaccine? Why would it matter then after that? It doesn't matter after that. Why would you need a vaccine passport after receiving a vaccine that prevents you from contracting a virus or giving a virus or spreading the virus? This was always my annoyance with the idea of asymptomatic transmission. I'm not a science person or a doctor. I don't know if you guys know this about me, but I'm neither of these things. I'm not a scientist person and I'm not a doctor person, but I'm not an idiot. And I do know that you can't give something to someone that you don't have. Now, there is some issue with transfer. You pick up, you transfer this, you touch something and it transfers. And that's logical, right? That happens with the flu. That's why they wanted us to stay apart from each other, even though now even that's been revised, that was just a guess based on a model. We need to stop with this 6 feet nonsense. It was just a guess. Even the CDC is like, well, yeah, we just guessed it. It's probably more like 3 feet, but it's probably 0 feet. But if you want to think about it logically, sure, all right. You sneeze, your droplets go through the air. Maybe it's helpful if you're not as close to those droplets. That's why teachers in classrooms get the flu all the time. Or they're picking up pencils and these kids have their dirty hands all over the pencils and the flu gets spread. Makes total sense to me. I don't see that as a crazy argument. But if you don't have anything to give to the teacher, you can't give it to the teacher. And we know so much about this virus now. We know that it doesn't transfer easily surface to surface. That's not how it's transmitted majorly. And so if you have the vaccine, you're not spreading it to anybody. You don't need that mask anymore. You don't need to social distance. You're not going to give it to somebody. If you have the vaccine, you don't need to worry about anything else. Now, I don't know how long these vaccines last. I mean, you get your flu vaccine every year. That's the other thing. You get your flu vaccine every year. Are you willing to give the government this type of power for the rest of your life? For every flu season, you need a vaxport to walk around, to do anything? It's not okay. It's creepy, you guys. It's really creepy. I understand that there are some people out there who think they are being good by saying that you should have a vaccine passport. But the slope is covered in grease. It really is. That is not conspiratorial or illogical at all. We don't have to look very far in history to see. We have all kinds of examples from the genocidal to very low on the list things, that didn't really harm millions and millions of people, but got out of hand and robbed people of their human rights. You don't have to look very far to find those things. So this isn't me talking out of my behind. This is a logical argument that can be backed up with history. So I don't think that it is a good idea at all. Like I said, that slip is slippery. That slope is slippery. And it's covered in grease. I think we should be concerned about it. I do.
Politics are becoming more and more divisive every day. My name is Colin Jackson. I'm the co-host of Not Another Political Podcast, where we reject popular opinions and prioritize solutions over partisan dogma. Download Not Another Political Podcast on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast entertainment today.
I covered this on my Should Vaccines Be Mandatory episode. And I said, the government should never be able to compel you to put something in your body that you don't want there. Now, I know what you're saying. It's not. This is a vaccine passport. It's not telling you have to get the vaccine. It's just saying you need the card to prove that you got the vaccine if you want to do other things. Well, if you can't, to quote the Biden administration, if you can't engage in commerce or employment without a vaccine card, then effectively that is the government telling you that you have to put something in your body that you may not want. Kids don't really get COVID. The survival rate for kids with COVID is 99.99999%. I think the number of children who just died just of COVID with no other complications this past year is 10. Children do not really get COVID. They get symptoms, and some of them, a few have gotten ill. But when I say a few, I mean a few of 330 million people in this country. Why are we developing a vaccine for kids? They don't need it. Why should I, as a mother, be compelled to put something in their bodies that they absolutely don't need? Do they need? I felt that way about the chickenpox vaccine, actually. I was surprised to find out that there was a chickenpox vaccine when I first had kids, because I just, I grew up in the era where it's like, well, you get chickenpox and that's your immunity. And so I was like, oh, that's cool. And so I got the vaccine, but I remember asking and I'm not vaccine skeptical or anything like that. I'm skeptical of like a vaccine that was developed in 9 months, but I'm not besides that, no. But I remember asking the pediatrician, well, like, do they need it? I'm the kind of person, I rarely even get flu shots. Like, I feel weird about having the flu in my body if I'm not worried about it. So I was like I won't even take aspirin if I don't need it. It's just, I'm lazy. And so I remember saying, well, do they really need it? Like, how bad is the chickenpox? You know what I mean? I grew up with the chickenpox, and like, if you get it, you can develop an immunity. And she was like, well, no, it's not the chicken pox is not a dangerous virus, but it can, live in your body and cause shingles later, and it could cause scarring. And she ran down the list. She was like, if this is something that you do one time, and then it gives your kids mostly protection, you can still get chicken pox with the shot. As a matter of fact, my son had mild chicken pox as a child, just very, very mild, even with the shot. But so I was like, okay, yeah, I guess that makes sense to me. I was thinking, if I don't need to put this in their body, if it's coming to them anyway, why would I do it? But she explained, I was like, all right, that makes sense. So they got their chicken pox shots among everything else. I think my daughter needs to go. I'm so bad about the vaccination schedules, you guys. I have been terrible about, in fact, my son's 19, and before he goes to college, I need to make sure that everything is up to date, because I'm not confident that it is. I'm a bad mom. I feel like other moms are like, I'm going in to get vaccine, and here's the yearly checkup. And with my kids, I'm just like, well, if you're not sick, we're probably not going to the doctor this year. Once they got out of like childhood, yeah, I don't know. That's probably growing up under universal health care. There was always this campaign, an ad campaign from the government. I don't know if they do it anymore, but when I was growing up, it was like they encourage you to stay home. They encourage you, don't come to the ER unless you have to. Don't take these medical services unless you're absolutely desperate. We have to preserve the health care for everybody. Don't come to the ER if you just have a cold. And my mom, she's a socialist, but she is like the good kind. Like, she is the kind that's like, everybody has their responsibility and everybody plays their part. And if we all do the right thing, then this will work. And that's how I was raised, even with coming to climate change, which I talk a little bit on the episode. But the idea is like, we're going to be the responsible ones, Kira, if we don't need to go to the ER or need the help of a doctor outside of your regular checkups or your vaxes, then we're not doing it. So I think I have that, because that's the responsible thing to do. You're preserving health care for people who really need it. And I think that's just an attitude I've carried into my adult life, even as an American. I've never really gotten it out of my head. And plus, it's just old school, right? If you grew up old school, we can't get my father-in-law to go to the doctor I'm not going to bust him out about the story about the time his wife broke her leg. I'm not going to bust him out like that. He definitely was put some Robitussin on it kind of guy. Anyways, I don't think we can compel people to put things in their body, and saying that you can't engage in regular life without this is doing exactly that, compelling people. I may feel that you should take your vaccines. I may feel that you should take a COVID vaccine. I actually don't think you should if you don't want to. I don't think you should. And I don't think you should have to. I think most people should. And I'm going to be excited when we get to herd immunity in this country. I think we could have been here a lot earlier. But that's another tangent I'm not willing to get on. I do have to go speak at an event soon, so I better wrap this up quickly. But yeah, I don't think the government can tell you what to do, what to put in your body. And you can just posit that out to anything, right? Like, forget about this vaccination. If the government finds out that vitamin D is really good for you and can prevent a lot of sickness, which it does actually, can the government compel you to take vitamin D before you can engage in commerce and public life? I know that it sounds silly. Kira, it's not going to go that far, but I mean, why won't it? What's your guarantee that it won't? Tell me why it won't. Write me. Kira Davis. No, not Kira Davis. I got a new email. I forgot. JLTY@protonmail.com. If I'm being silly thinking that the government can explain to me why. Explain to me why government typically restrains itself, which I don't believe is true. Government never restrains itself. It will always take more. The more you give, it will always take, because government is a powerful entity and people can't resist power. I don't think that sounds conspiratorial. I think that's just human nature. So and that's what the founding fathers realized about the Constitution. That's why the Constitution is a list of negative rights. The Constitution is a list of protections. It is not a list of do's and don'ts. Because the Constitution is set up, ideally speaking, to endow people with their rights and then let them pursue the rest of life. These are the rights that they cannot be given to them and they cannot be taken away. The government's only role is to protect those rights. But how is a vaxport a protection of your rights? Well, Kira, it's a protection of the lives of many people that will be lost. If you don't care about people dying, what about them being protected? Well, no, a vaccine passport is not a protection for COVID from people. The vaccine passport doesn't offer you anything. It doesn't cure you of anything. It just proves that you had a vaccination. And having the vaccination is not a guarantee. And having the vaccination is not even necessary to prevent all of this death. Like I just pointed out, all we need to do is get to herd immunity. And then we can be in a place where people who feel vulnerable can simply stay home or wear their 2 or 3 or 4 masks, whatever they want to do, and gloves when they go out, and refrain from being in crowded places at restaurants or concerts. The people who are vulnerable can then make those decisions easier instead of, well, simply by virtue of breathing, everybody's the enemy. We get to herd immunity. We don't need to worry about anything. So the vaccine passport is ridiculous. Why would the government want you to have a vaccine passport? Well, they want you to know that you are vaccinated so that you're not going to be spreading COVID all over the place. Okay, well, then we know if you're vaccinated, you're not spreading COVID and you're not getting COVID. So there's no need for any of this other stuff once we hit herd immunity. The government has just admitted that if you have the vaccine, you're good to go. You're all right. So there's no need for lockdowns, masks, social distancing, none of that, right? We can go back to life. The government has just admitted it through their intention of making us use a vaxport. So maybe that's the reason why the government would want you to have a vaxport, so you can prove that you're okay. Why else might the government want you to have a vaxport? Because they can track you. Kira, they can already track you through your phone. If you have a phone, they can. I get it. I have a phone and a computer. And I feel that I am tracked a lot. And I voluntarily engage in that, by the way. I know my phone tracks me. I know my apps track me. I know that in the 212 pages of terms and conditions of use for the iPhone or for my computer or for whatever app I'm signing up for, I know in there is some agreement that I'm giving them my information, that I'm giving them the ability to use location tracker and to use this. I am voluntarily buying the iPhone. The government doesn't compel me to buy an iPhone. I'm voluntarily buying the iPhone. I'm voluntarily signing up for these apps. I am aware that I am engaging in this tracking when I use my phone. It is a concession I make, a trade-off I make for the convenience of the technology. There's no such exchange being offered in the vaxport conversation. All that is all involuntary. So it's one thing for my phone to track me. It's quite another for Washington, D.C. to do so. And do you want that? Because remember what we always talk about on this show? We talk about how the party you love is not always going to be in charge. So if you're a Democrat and you're really excited that right now Democrats have all 3 branches of government, that's not going to last. There's going to be an election next year and then a presidential election, and politics are cyclical no matter how crazy this last election was or wasn't. All politics are cyclical. Why would you hand the Republicans that type of power? What if you get another Donald Trump? I know you hate Donald Trump. What if you get another Donald Trump and he says, if you're a Democrat, you need a passport to cross state lines. You need a passport to engage in public life because we don't trust you guys. We don't trust your sensibilities. We don't trust you we don't trust you with guns. We don't trust you with your Second Amendment rights, your First Amendment rights. What if that happened? Why would you give the government that power knowing that someday another guy like Donald Trump might come along? The only way to protect yourself against that is by using the apparatus of freedom to make sure it doesn't happen at all. I don't have to make this argument for the other side because the other side already feels this way. The other side already recognizes, I think, that government flips a lot. And the best way to protect yourself from government and from egregious overreach that could turn dangerous is to err on the side of freedom. And freedom isn't free. It is costly. It does cost. I think there's a lot of Americans who aren't willing to bear the cost of the things that are good and righteous.
Politics are becoming more and more divisive every day. My name is Colin Jackson. I'm the co-host of Not Another Political Podcast, where we reject popular opinions and prioritize solutions over partisan dogma. Download Not Another Political Podcast on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast entertainment today.
I think it's a fair argument or a fair question to ask. Where does it stop? And in fact, I think it is a question we should be asking in perpetuity, no matter what is coming down the pipe. I think we should always be asking this question. If we start here, where does it stop? And maybe you can apply that to your personal life, but certainly with government. Government should be limited in our lives. That it is not an extremist question or a crazy question to ask. Where does it stop? And in fact, I think that anybody who thinks that sounds conspiratorial or a little bit, that's a little bit hyper reactive, Kira. That's a little bit fringe. Where does it stop? I don't know. How can any American say where does it stop? Especially if you're on the left, when all I hear from the left is how awful America is. And all I hear is about all the atrocities that we've committed. And we have committed some atrocities against our own people in this country. I mean, I don't have to break down history, Native American history. Hello, slavery. Hello, Jim Crow. Where does it stop? We've seen how far it can go. So I don't think it's a crazy question to say, where does it stop? It's not. I think that's an intelligent and logical response. Knowing, if you know American history, I don't know why you would think, well, if the government says it's fine, then it's fine. We should trust them. Why? We're having to this day conversations about, quote, institutional racism. All right. Well, if our government is institutionally racist, then why in the hell would we give them carte blanche to do whatever, to require whatever they want of us, to require a vaxport so we can engage in commerce, which is our God-given right? Why would we trust the government for that if we think that the government is institutionally racist, is inherently racist? Why would we trust the government when we have people who to this day will stand up in Congress and talk about how horrible America has been, how we've been so burdened by racism and so burdened by sexism. And look at this bill that the Republicans rejected. It's the Equal Rights Act. By the way, the Equal Rights Act, just because something has a nice name, people, doesn't mean that it does nice things. So the next time you question, and I always do this, every time I see the headline, Republicans or Democrats reject bill to XYZ, first thing I do is go read the bill. Because the story is not in the headline, the story is in the bill. Believe it or not, most people in Congress don't reject bills because they just hate a certain group of people so much they don't want to see them get nice things. That's not it. A lot of times there's weird stuff plugged into the bill, or a lot of pork, a lot of fat, as we call it, that doesn't need to be there, that drives up the cost of the bill, that gives your money to the pet causes of politicians that, we shouldn't have been arguing about that damn stimulus bill for 6 months. There's no law that says a bill has to be 400 pages. A bill can be 3 sentences. Every person in America gets $1,400. End of story. That's the bill. Up or down vote. There's no law that says it needs to be any more complicated than that. Every person with a social security number in this country gets $1,400. Boom. Done. Regardless of your economic status, regardless. Doesn't matter. If you don't need it, you can give it to somebody. All the rest, what you need for businesses, Kira, businesses need loans, or what about the airline industry? Okay, you do that in another bill that can be 400 pages. So the idea that a bill is just rejected out of hand because people don't want nice groups groups they like to get nice things. No, you go read the bill and see what's in there. A lot of times there's a reason why it got rejected. The Equal Rights Act is one of those. It's actually not a good bill. It's a terrible bill. I don't see anything crazy about questioning the idea of a slippery slope for our government, especially when we are well versed. We are all well versed, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, or I might say especially if you're on the left. You are well versed in the idea of government intrusions into private life and how it never stops at a place, right? Where does it stop is a reasonable question to ask. I was having a conversation with a friend. Well, I have this conversation with liberal friends a lot. It's not it's a very typical or basic argument that I get from the left, but it's like, well, we needed the government to get rid of slavery. We needed the government to get rid of Jim Crow and segregation. Actually, that was the people pushing the government. But okay, fair enough. If you want to ask this question, where does it stop when it comes to government policy? I think that question could be applied to the abolition of slavery and the abolition of Jim Crow in the civil rights era. Because you look at those people and you say, well, if we grant them the right to vote, where does it stop? Well, that's an easy question to answer. It stops at the Constitution. These people they were born with the constitutional right to vote. They just had that right stripped by the government. By the government, by the way. So the idea that we're just going to trust government because they finally got their act together to restore the constitutional rights of Black Americans. But that's such an easy answer. It's such an easy thing. Yeah, I know where it stops. It stops at the Constitution. It stops at you restoring these persons' rights and then leaving them the hell alone to go live their life. So that's how I respond to that. But I don't think it's a crazy argument. Where does it stop is a good thing to ask. I think you should ask it about a lot. I think you should ask it when your kids want to do something. Your kids want to play with the water balloons. Where does it stop? Are you going to be filling up water balloons all day because they're going to be hounding you all day? Does it stop after that first bucket is gone? If you can guarantee it stops after that first bucket is gone, great. You can have the water balloon fight. But if you know that your kids are just going to be hounding you all day long after they've run through their first batch of water balloons, then maybe you don't get started in the first place. You know what I mean? I think where does it stop is a great question to ask, but I think it's an especially great question to ask of your government and to always be asking it. There's nothing wrong with that. So I think I've made my case for why vaccine passports are an awful idea. I don't feel like entertaining the other side on this argument, to be honest. I think I did in the beginning, and I thought there was only one good or one reasonable, and I don't even find it to be that reasonable, but one argument against it for it is the idea that, well, we want people to get back to real life, and this is how we protect vulnerable people by making sure there's not unvaccinated people walking around. But again, if we get to herd immunity, it's a non-issue. So why would you give the government permission to track you like that? Especially when you already have all these other things, these devices and stuff. I like to believe that the American people are going to push back on this. And I think that we should. I don't think we should entertain this notion in the least. And I know for sure that there are already constitutional challenges being prepared as we speak. So, and for sure the anti-vax crowd, I mean, they have become experts in this type of litigation, right? You can go back to listen to my episode on vaccinations and should they be mandatory to know. I told you, look, I don't have much in agreement with those who think that vaccines are a problem, but I will fight with them and stand by them and fight for their right to not be forced to put something into their kid's body that they don't want there. And they have become experts at prosecuting this type of litigation. So I have a lot of faith in them, and I'm excited to stand next to them in this fight, and proud to. Again, this is a difference of opinion. This is not a judgment on anyone's character that I have. If you think vaccines are harmful, then I'm happy for you to think that and to make your arguments. Again, more power to you. And I'll be proud to stand with y'all against this because, yeah, I don't think anybody should be compelled. You shouldn't be compelled to drink alcohol if you don't want it. You shouldn't be compelled to eat green beans if you don't want them, unless you're 5 years old and your mom is telling you that you can't have dessert unless you eat the green beans. But the government can't compel you to eat green beans because it's better for your health and we're going to end up paying for your health care anyway. So take care of yourself now so we have less of a burden later. No, which is, again, another reason why I'm against universal health care. It leaves a lot of room for the government to compel you to do things that might even be good for you. But it's none of the government's business. So I think the vaccine passport is no different. I look forward to the pushback on it. This is my line in the sand. I will not participate in this. I will not support it. I mean, we'll see, right? We'll see if it becomes law and I can't engage. I will make them pay at the ballot box. And you should too. I know a lot of people are feeling weird about some of the election fraud and this and that. But to be honest, I feel very strongly that sooner or later, the voice of the American people speaks. And we can see that here happening in California with the recall, and we will see it in the next election. So make them pay. Make them scared of you. Make your political, quote, superiors frightened of you. Call your representatives and tell them you're not going to support this. You do not support a vaxport. Who's doing a vaxport? The Chinese. That's who. That right there should be paused. Do we want to be copying a communist country? Ugh, never mind, because I know some of you out there are like, well, yeah, actually, yeah. So that's another JLTY for another day. I've got to get going. I want to thank you all for your support of the show, of course. And I want to let you know that I'm holding a contest. Doing a contest for a new theme song for JLTY. We're going to run up against some copyright issues here really soon, so we need to get our own original music. And if you want to write a song, or if you have a song already that you think would be great for a theme song, send it to me at JLTY@protonmail.com, JLTY@protonmail.com. Send me your song. If we choose your song, it can be the 30 seconds. But if you have a full song, I think that's great, because if we choose your song, you'll win A, $150, and B, your song will get an official release on the Orchard and Sony Records. So that and FCB Records. So that is a big deal. FCB Records works with the Orchard at Sony Music, and so to have that released on that label, yeah, it's kind of a big deal. So send me your idea for the show. Again, that's JLTY@protonmail.com. We have until, I think, April 15th to find something. So, yeah, get a song in there. Let me know. Let me hear. I'm looking forward to it. I hate to get rid of the Dua Lipa song. I really love it. I think it fits the show, but it is what it is. Copyrighted is what it is. And fair enough. She's an artist. She should be paid fairly for her music. Can't get mad at her for that. Join me over at Davis Nation on Locals, which is davisnation.locals.com. And follow me on Twitter at Real Kira Davis. I've got a Very Merry podcast coming out this week. Spring Fling. Amelia and I did a Spring Fling movie, and that was really fun. So it was fun to kind of get back together with that. And I went to Arizona to drop my nephew off. It's 6 hours from here to there. So I just drove him home, and I stayed to record with my father-in-law. So we recorded a nice lengthy interview, and I'm going to chop it up and release it as mini-sodes for you guys. But he had some great insight and comments, and I know you guys are going to be really excited to hear from him. I'm going to get a lot of responses from this one. I know I will. So I'm excited to chop those up and release those to you over the next 2 or 3 weeks. So look out for those things. Until we meet again, my friends, don't forget, every once in a while, just stop and listen to yourself.
The FCB Radio Network. First class broadcasting worldwide.